Hello. Recently, I had the chance to prepare a presentation for the Women Hospitality and Travel Tech Spanish chapter. So it was done in Spanish and it was very well received. So I was asked if I could translate it and do it in English, and here I am. So it's basically the same presentation. I changed a few things because the previous one was more focused on the Spanish and Latin American markets. And this one is more global, but the content is very, very similar. So hopefully you find it useful as well. The theme behind this is the tourism and the trends that are coming now, how the tourism has evolved from pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, which we're still in, and what can we expect coming to the new year. So I think it's fits very well now into the Christmas season, end of the year, recapping what's going on and what to expect in the coming months, and also the trends that are coming in terms of the workforce. Okay, what are the motivations, what are their expectations, and what can be done to make sure we keep as professionals of the industry best talent. Okay, so the way we're going to structure this presentation, as I was saying, is pre-pandemic tourism, this transition, which has been a forced transition into the future, and the future of the job market past 2030, with the last example on the way I see the way forward. Okay, focusing on the front desk of a hotel, for example. So if we go into the tourism numbers, we have the fact that tourism was growing non-stop. Basically, these are numbers from the United Nations World Travel Organization. Over 25 years of growth in the last 10 years, basically double amount of tourism traveling globally. That means that tourism was the second largest industry in the world if we put chemical and fuels together as a petrochemical industry. International tourism, 1.56 billion US dollars that were generated by the travel industry. So I think well, numbers show that it's an industry to take very seriously in the global scene. Top destinations, that's interesting. These two charts, the left shows the destinations by number of arrivals. So France has been topping the charts for the last few years, 89 million tourists or visitors in 2018, the last full year results. Then we have Spain, 83, the US, 80, and then you see the rest in there. On the right-hand side, you have the number of the amount of revenue, generated per country. And you see a lot of different swapping places in the chart. So the US, which was third, it now goes into the first spot, which means that people traveling to the US spend much more on average than the ones going to France, for example, which goes from the first to the third place. Or Thailand, for example, in the UK, which were 9th and 10th in terms of number of visitors, go 4th and 5th when it comes to revenue, which shows that tourists going there, again, spend higher than the average. So it might be a bit of a misconception when it comes to who goes where and how much is spent. For example, Spain, it usually is seen as a destination for with a lot of volume on cheaper tourists, but numbers show that it's number 2 when it comes to number of arrivals, and also number 2 when it comes to revenue. So interesting way to compare them both. I think they moving forward, they should always be shown together, number of arrivals and revenue generated in total, okay, so they can be compared. Now, forced transition, 2020, okay, things were going fine, but pandemic hit very, very hard, and a lot of things have had to change. So there's a massive drop in business travel. Amazon alone is saying that the coronavirus saved them $1 billion in travel expenses from their own employees, because they're using the technology we're using all now, Zoom, which is what I'm using to record this video, for example, Microsoft Teams, any software you're using, it's helping us communicate in the distance remotely and saving companies lots of revenue in travel expenses, hotels, flights, etc. Question is, once the pandemic is over, will business send or spend as much money on travel expenses as they did before? Because my guess is no, they won't. And also Bill Gates saying that, so I think probably a more relevant voice than me. He's expecting a drop of 50% when it comes to business travel after the pandemic, because loads of meetings, loads of travel trips will, business-related trips, it's been shown that they were not maybe absolutely necessary. Also, Forbes, for example, is talking about the impact on the airline industry and it's saying that most of those business trips won't be back next year, or probably will never be back. That average business person working 3-4 days a week in a different location and then going back home on the weekends, unless really needs to attend certain particular meetings, probably that trip will be over. And large companies, especially American corporations, are asking their staff to stay working remotely at least until mid next year, which might be extended then. So it's something really to consider. That has meant a lot of job losses. So it's calculated by the United Nations WTO that over 200 million jobs have been lost in the industry because of the impact of the pandemic. Obviously, there was a massive effect on the stock exchange. So most European market stock exchange, have seen a massive drop on the beginning, from the beginning of the pandemic, and then they haven't really recovered yet, which shows a very different story when we look, for example, into China. So looking into the pent-up demand, we see that China is already at the next level. So they completely recover when it comes to the stock exchange, and when it comes to tourism as well, they are already recovering. So in the autumn, winter, they already have some bank holidays, so the hotels were full because all this pent-up demand. And we probably it's challenging for us in Europe, for example, to understand the sheer size of the market. We're talking about like 1.3 billion people who at the moment cannot really travel abroad. So they are traveling, the ones who can afford it, traveling within their borders. And obviously that's helping increase the numbers, the occupancy and of the hotels in the city in China. So a lot of pent-up demand, I was saying, in China, but also in Europe. So this is from the half term in late October, when there was a corridor between the UK, for example, and the Canary Islands and some Greek islands as well. And this is from the UK newspapers, and there were too many Britons in Greek and Spanish islands during the half-term break. So demand is there. It's just people cannot travel because they're not being allowed now. So on this trend, number one, I was calling in terms of pent-up demand. As soon as the pandemic or the vaccine is given to most of the population and people is allowed to travel again, there'll be a massive demand for lesser travel, mainly. What is important here is that from the revenue point of view, hotels are able to react, so they are ready for when this demand starts coming up or starts booking, so hotels don't fill up too quickly, too cheap, maybe. So it will be challenging because there is a lot of need to attract those bookings, but at the same time, hotels need to be smart, and the timing here is going to be very, very important. So trend number two is about the growth of digital nomads. Okay, it's not a term that it's a term, that is coming up a lot in the pandemic, but it didn't start now. So I wanted to pick, for example, on this news, which is from January this year, so months before the pandemic became a thing in 2020, and it was already talking about that how digital nomads were shaping the world of working in 2020. Just in the US, it's 43 people of the workforce is working remotely at least sometime during the year, and there's a higher increased percentage of the population of the workforce that it's willing to work remotely. Now, working remotely doesn't necessarily mean working from home. Once a person is allowed to work remotely, not to go to the office daily or for a period of time, you can decide to go elsewhere. Okay, and we'll see different examples later of what a concept can be in terms of co-living or catering for digital nomads, but it's important to keep that in mind. And comes a term that it's coming, which is called geo-arbitrage. So taking advantage of a cheaper destination to relocate there, working remotely for a company that is paying you a salary in euros or dollars. So you have a much higher standard of living and take advantage of that working remotely from, let's say, paradise, whatever you decide to choose as a destination. Trend number three, changes on the visitors' motivation. So there is a lot of talk from the nations and corporations in terms of what is important and what they care for. And the reason number one, 100% of them agree that their number one concern is sustainability. Okay, 100%. All companies have that as a top priority. However, If you look at the right, and that is only the sixth main motivator when it comes to traveling from the consumer point of view. Okay, and that's something to take into consideration. We cannot just assume that the expectations or the needs, priorities from companies are the same than the ones from the travelers. They should be, but they are not, as you can clearly see here. So sixth reason to travel. Number two is just to show off, to Instagram pictures of destination. It might sound funny or sad, depending on how you look at it, but it's a fact. Lots of people, the main reason for them to travel is just to be able to show off. Luckily, number one reason is to travel to change, okay? To live like a local, to quest for authenticity and transformation, to live that real local experience. Okay? We look at the second reason, we're talking about the showing off, the Instagrammable destination. Sydney, for example, was the number one destination for Instagram this last year. There's a ranking for that as well. The top 10 where I'm reading here: Sydney, Hong Kong, Dubai, New York, Singapore, Tokyo, Lisbon, Bali, London, and Jaipur in India. There is loads and loads of people traveling with that in mind. So are we as a destination making our environment Instagrammable? Is it attractive enough? Is it appealing enough, for example, to attract people? Having that in mind, it's something that it should be considered when designing landscapes or creating environments in cities or destinations. Number one reason, travel to change. Okay, so to live like a local, that authenticity, that transformation we're mentioning just now. What does that mean? It might sound too high. Now, number one destination for the travelers, it's travel to change, to have that local experience, okay? And it's easier than it might sound. So it's about making sure the team, for example, in your hotel, in your establishment, recommends the local coffee shop, for example, the local shop. The restaurant has been run for 3 generations by a local family. That bookshop that has been there for 100 years down the street, making sure you buy proximity products, okay, so there is less impact, and there is a real sense of community, the real sense of feeling the environment of the local place or that destination. Okay, it's a bit silly, I would say, to go to a French hotel, for example, and have Fiji water in there, to give an example. Okay, why not having local mineral water? Why having a water that is coming from the other side of the globe? Okay, so that's also part of local. There are little details, okay, but all helps to have that local experience. Okay. When it comes to local experiences, you have these massive corporations. One could be, for example, Marriott, which they purchased experience companies some years ago, and they put it as a part of the Bonvoy program. And also Airbnb for many years, already selling experiences on their website. So they contact local people to sell their experience. Obviously, they get a commission, which is a blessing and a curse. Okay, so they give loads of exposure to these people, otherwise it might be more difficult to find. But at the same time, you add an intermediary to that local expert, okay, so it's not getting the entire profit. So it's kind of love-hate relation with the intermediaries, I guess. And those topics about the local experience touch some of the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. So again, another very good reason to focus on the local experiences. Trend number 4, there's going to be a decrease in urban or city stays and a massive growth, the way I see it, on lesser stays. Okay, so we focus on urban and city tourism. We're talking about co-working, co-living, and the biggest expression of that, it will be, for example, we work, or we group, was we work, we grow, and we live. Challenge here is, if I am a New York professional, for example, and I want to relocate because I can work remotely, what will be the attraction of coming to London, for example, in terms of cost? I'm saying, okay, obviously it's a very attractive city, but it's going to be as much or maybe even more expensive than where I'm coming from. So from that point of view, it is challenging for this sort of company to attract certain profiles because they are located in relatively high destinations when it comes to costs. Okay, and a proof that is that they've grown so fast, so quick, too much, sorry, too fast, and SoftBank, which is the bank who was pumping money to them, I think they've lost $26 billion in the enterprise. So, a very challenging time for this company. Then you have the leisure tourism, okay, the opposite concept. So you have longer stays, bleisure, and you have digital nomads, and you have assisted living. And I'm going to get into detail on the three of them. So on longer stays, bleisure, business, and leisure, it's something that is, again, up and coming this year, but it's been there for many years. So I just took this screenshot of a post in the Philippines from early 2016, when Richard Quest, when CNN was talking there already about American people traveling to the Philippines and extending their stay, their business stay, to add some leisure time in there. So it's that destination that, let's say, for example, you have to work, you're sent to Japan for a week work, so you add in those extra few days of holiday. So since you're there and the company is paying for the flight, you take that extra time off to enjoy. So to attract that kind of business for especially city hotels, they need to create certain packages, certain amenities that cater that kind of profile, okay, make it attractive, special offers for bleisure market. That's key in there. When it comes to digital nomads, we mentioned before, I think a better example, if I can say, it would be, for example, Selena, which is a company set up in Panama, a lot of presence in Latin America. And as Forbes said, is a digital nomad hotel of the future. Why? Because they tend to be located in not key destination, but very attractive ones. So you have some pictures in there of locations in Central and Latin America. And it's more the concept of the young entrepreneur / independent professional who is able to take the laptop and work from anywhere. It doesn't need to be a backpacker. It does not essentially that sort of profile they're catering for, but more for professionals who, since they can travel and work remotely, instead of working from home, they'd rather go to a very nice location to meet like-minded people and enjoy their stay there. So extended stays, and that more of a better work-life balance based on the destination. That's a very interesting concept, I think, to look at. And then we have assisted living, okay, which is a concept that is very, very popular in the US, growing in the UK, for example, but not that popular in other destinations. We're talking about the adapted housing for elderly people, okay, elderly people. It's not a geriatric residence, so it's not a care home, but it's a destination where people who are over 65 usually, or maybe even over 75, they rather not live alone, okay? They might not have family to take care of them, or they don't want to be a burden to the family. So if they have a nicely adapted house, apartment, or condo, whatever it is, for them, with some medical attention on call, okay, then it's the ideal choice for them, okay? And this is a study from Cybil, for example, the last few years, and 54% of elderly people like to live in a retirement home, which is not a care home, okay? And 43% of them would rather live in a sort of suitable residence offering different services, okay? So some activities more suited for that kind of age group. It's a growing market, which is also very interesting to consider when it comes to leisure tourism and extending the seasons on certain destinations. So how is that demand going to be handled? And we come into the challenge of the manpower in the future, okay? So the future of the job market past 2030, and this is a study done by Boston Consulting Group some years ago, using first Germany as an example, but it shows that the labor supply is going to be very, very short compared to the labor demand. Why? Because of the demographic changes. So there is less people being born in certain countries. There are more jobs being demanded. So especially new roles, okay, because thanks to the technology, there are new roles being created that don't exist now. So we have two problems there. One is the lack of talent in general, lack of employees. And the second is the lack of qualified employees for that particular sort of role, which might not even exist yet. Okay, we're talking about 2030, 10 years from now. So in this particular case, in Germany, it talks about that 20% of the current workforce it's missing. Okay, they have a 8 million workforce shortage when it comes to Germany, and it extended to many other countries. So this survey was done with 200,000 people in different countries. And you can see Germany is a case of 23% of shortage, for example. And you have Russia -24, Brazil 33%, South Korea 26%. So loads of developed countries, they're going to face a challenge when it comes to the workforce in the coming years because of the demographic change. Okay, there are not enough children being born. The easiest or fastest way to change that is to attract manpower from abroad. Okay, so to get immigrants coming in. Challenge is that is not very popular in many countries on one hand, and on the other hand is that even though you attract them, you need to train them, because as I was saying, those roles might not even exist yet. So they really need to get the talent properly trained to be able to cover those jobs. So we're talking about the lack of manpower and the fact that they are unqualified for those roles they will have to work on in the future. So what to do? What I suggest as a way forward is we covered tourist motivations, but we have to cover the employees' motivations. Okay, so if we understand what moves the millennials, what's in their mind, what are the priorities and the likes, then as an employer, you can adapt the role to the motivations to make it more attractive. So you attract the best talent to your company. Okay, so motivations and preferences of the workforce. This is part of the Boston Consulting Group study done a few years ago. And surprisingly, having an attractive salary is only the 8th top motivation for employees. Okay, number 7, we have having a permanent contract, which comes by default in many destinations, but not in many others. Number 6, it's the learning and career development, being able to progress and grow within the company or during the career. Number 5 is financial stability of the company, making sure that your job is safe in that sense. Good relation with management. Number 4, nice work and life balance, and that's growing in importance when it comes with younger generations. Number 2 is good relation with colleagues, and top priority, top motivation for millennials is to feel appreciated, to feel valued. And that's really to be considered when it comes to looking for talent. So knowing, as we know, the motivations from the employees, now the top priorities for the employers should be to make sure that they attract the right professionals, that they invest on education and upskilling, and also that they do their best to keep the top talent in there. Okay, so what I've done is an example of adapting the role to the future so that you attract that talent and keep it within your company. So I've used an example which is close to my heart, which is front office of a hotel, and how they should be transitioning from agents to ambassadors. I was in a conference call the other day, and someone was talking about the fact that they cannot afford to have 15 front office agents and 1 guest relations manager or guest relations supervisor. Instead, they need to understand that they now have 16 agents. Okay, so the roles are evolving and they need to adapt. I'll go through that in detail. And it doesn't make any sense to have someone call as an agent if the functions that they were doing before, I don't need it anymore. Okay, so we have to redesign the roles. We have to push for continuous learning, and we need to focus also on incentive plans. Okay, and I'm going to go that into detail now, so that those actions appeal to the motivations and priorities for the team members. Okay, so as I was saying, from front office to brand ambassador, redesigning roles, what we have to focus on from the company point of view is to adapt the role to the technology available. So I was saying before, the roles functions have changed thanks to the technology. Check-in, check-out, reservation, booking a transfer, order room service, even getting the invoice, everything can be done through an app or online if the guest wants that. So much of the time dedicated in the past to paperwork and to certain transactions, admin transactions, let's say from the receptionist point of view, are gone. They don't need it anymore. So we need to make sure that the role evolves and we adapt that role, the tasks from the role to the new needs. What are the needs? What should the agent, the brand ambassador, be doing now in the future? Spend more time with the customers, spend more time with the guests. That person should be able to multitask. should be able to check in, to check how to make you the best coffee, to prepare a cocktail for you, to park your car, to leave your run your luggage. And it's not about like cutting resources. No, it's about utilizing that talent to different ends so that the guest perceives a real personalized treatment and they are not feel like cattle, like sometimes they might have been they were treated because of the size of certain hotels. Okay, so adapting the role, adapting the tasks, the processes of the shift to the new role thanks to the technology, trained and adapted to the new role. So if the functions are different, obviously the training needs to be different as well and needs to be adapted to the new role, the new function they're going to be there doing during the shift. So it's important to adapt that training to the new role and also adapt the spaces. So you have in mind the old hotels with the very long, there's the very long counter, creating a distance between the customer and the employee. That shouldn't happen anymore. Okay, we should have either individual stations, which many hotels already have, or no station at all. Okay, the lobby area should be a kind of fluid space, but the receptionist or brand ambassador should be able to walk around from the from one part of the lobby to the other to check you in, to get that coffee, as I was saying before. So there's no need for the old setup that we had in the past. So let's change that. Okay, let's adapt and let's get ready for when the business go back to normal, as they want to call it. So by doing this, creating these actions, we are touching on different motivations from the team, learning and career development, for example, and number one, feeling appreciated because we are dedicating efforts to them. If we move into continuous learning, we have to keep in mind the fact that training and upskilling is very important. Sales training is also very important, and we should include lateral mobility within the different roles. Now, it's a common sense to make sure you invest in your team members. They should be passionate, they should be proactive, yeah, true. But to make sure they give their best and they perform to their best ability, you need to make sure you invest on them as well. So training, very, very important, and upskilling, making sure they feel empowered and they learn new skills so that eventually they can move roles. It doesn't necessarily need to be up, so that old-fashioned, let's call it vertical mobility. It can also be lateral mobility. Our front office manager, for example, moving to housekeeping manager role, or the other way around. Someone for housekeeping moving into rooms, reservations to revenue, marketing to revenue. Okay, there should be more movement, lateral mobility within the departments. And also very important point there on the second position, the sales training. Every team member should be able to generate revenue for the hotel. Old-fashioned mentality is a sales job, is a marketing job. No, well, yeah, partly is their job, but everybody else needs to help them. So someone for reception, upselling, cross-selling. Concierge shouldn't be that kind of isolated role anymore. We should include them into the brand ambassador team within the front office. Anyone from the bar or restaurant should be able to describe every dish, every wine, every spa treatment as well. So we shouldn't just isolate, within our department and learn about our offerings. So rooms will be described by the front desk, or dishes or specialties in the restaurant by the F&B department. No, everyone should be able to have that knowledge and be able to describe everything properly. And even if they are not facing customers, if they're on the phone, reservations, or via email, via chat, if that's the case and you have that sort of technology, every person involved needs to be able to generate revenue, and that comes through training. Okay, very, very important training. If we do that, we're going to be touching point 6 on the motivations of this learning and career development. And hopefully, if there is any sort of incentives program, which we're going to touch base in a second, we'll also touch the salary plus the good relation with the management, because they feel appreciated. So hopefully we'll also touch the first motivational point in their list of motivations. If we look into the next and last point, incentive plans, very, very important that if the team is generating extra revenue and doing the extra mile for you, you give them something back. Yeah, and not only training, it needs to be some sort of recognized and well-established incentive plan. It doesn't necessarily only need to be monetary. So usually what we have in mind, it's a sales team, they do a sale, they get a commission. That's absolutely fine, but there's no need for it. it doesn't necessarily need to be just monetary. It can be also non-monetary, but it can be emotional as well. So we have the monetary, we said, can be a commission, for example, direct commission, or it can be based on certain results achieved. Non-monetary, it can be getting a chosen day off, for example, or certain shifts that they choose. Training is part of the non-monetary incentive, okay? Being able to pay for certain training within the hotel or outside of the hotel sometimes, if that is possible, or certain pension schemes, for example, medical insurance, dental insurance, or vouchers can be the non-monetary one. And then emotional, it's touching the main first point here, feeling appreciated and valued. We're talking about improving the climate within the company or the team, making sure that you increase the involvement from the team, that motivation is there, the ambience within the team members, it's very the atmosphere, okay, which is touching some of the points that I mentioned before. So good relation with the management, good relation with the colleagues in there, so that all together they touch again the main point, the main motivator for the new workforce, which is feeling appreciated and feeling valued. So all in all, recapping, we've talked about the changes happening this year, which is about to end, and the fact that they're here to stay. Some things, tiny things, will go back to the way they used to be, but as the United Nations just released this week, there is a restart within the tourism industry, and it's the best time to adapt to the new changes that are here to stay, as I'm saying, and go with the flow and be leading that change, be part of that change. Also, hotels and teams need to be ready for the pent-up demand, which is waiting to travel as soon as possible. So as we were saying before, careful not to feel too early, okay? Be wise, be smart with the revenue pricing so that you maximize it. And there will be, in the years to come, shortage of top talent there. So you need to adapt your roles and offerings to the new priorities and motivations of the millennial workforce, which are the ones joining in. In the past, main priority was money and then being able to grow professionally, staying probably within the same company. Now people have much more lateral mobility. They are ready to switch and to jump jobs, but we need to make sure we keep the top talent, giving them what they need, okay, with the priorities we reviewed in there. So hopefully you found this session helpful. Here's my link, your link to my LinkedIn and my email address. If you want to contact me, you have any questions, any doubt, please feel free to reach out and I'll be very happy to answer them. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers, bye.